Hey, this is Andy Morahan. You're listening to Appetite for Distortion with Brando.
You know where they are.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
And welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode 187. My name is Brando, another one of the sub-series, Feel My Quarantine. I'm here in my apartment in Woodside, Queens. Normally, I'm in the beautiful iHeartRadio studios in New York City, but I'm here at home wearing, I shouldn't tell you that I'm wearing pajama pants at the moment. I mean, that's the beauty of radio, but it is what it is. However, I appreciate every single one of you who have been helping me keep down my cabin fever by taking part of this podcast, of these episodes and these interviews. And this is just a name that has been, I guess, a part of my, not just GunsNRoses' life, but just the folklore. If you love music, the days of the music video, and somebody, I'm really just honored. I think that's the appropriate word. I don't think I could find a better word than just honored, honestly. So Andy Morahan, I don't know, because I guess even though you've been so nice in the email and stuff, I find myself, and I admit it, a little nervous because I grew up, I mean, November Rain and all these videos, George Michael, and it's just like, wow. You look at your resume and it's just, it's as impressive as anybody's. Do you ever take time in your life now that we are all under quarantine and kind of sit back and be like, wow, look at everything that I've done? Does that happen often?
Well, weirdly enough, I did a kind of inventory of all the videos that I'd worked on or done or directed or whatever about a year ago anyway, and with the view of, kind of writing it all down and, from a kind of cultural point of view, not that I particularly have a story or a book I want to sell or anything, but I just thought it was a kind of interesting exercise. Of course, now it's the perfect time to continue with that. So I've been kind of filing them into year by year and kind of chapters in my mind and in, the first artists I worked with and how one led to another and another led to another. And it's kind of fascinating kind of trawl through my adventures in rock and roll, basically.
I would like to think you would put out a book, but I mean, in a way, your book kind of exists out there with music videos. Before we just get into all that, the most important thing is, how are you? How are you dealing with this quarantine? Because you're in the UK at the moment. How are things over there?
It got pretty bad over the last couple of weeks, but I don't live in London anymore. I live down in Somerset near Bristol and Bath, south of that in the countryside. So I'm lucky. So the southwest is probably the least kind of dangerous place to be. I have kids, grown-up kids who are living in, working out of apartments in London, which is been pretty stir-crazy for them. But it seems to be easing off in London now. But, the last few weeks have been tough more for other people than me. So I've been okay. Good.
Were you... I'm assuming, are you going stir crazy? Because I don't know the last time your website, it seems pretty updated, and it just looks like I don't know how you're fitting all of this into your schedule, these projects and movies and things that you're working on. Are they all on hold? Like, how are you handling? Or is this the perfect time to edit? Like, just sit home and edit?
No. It's a weird thing because, I mainly do movies now rather than music videos or commercials, and so I'm in the kind of third stage of what I want to do. And weirdly enough, before the lockdown, I'd finished rewriting a script for some producers when we were just about to go out to cast. That's called Severance. It's like a heist movie set in Europe. And then I've also, for some other producers, been adapting a Victor Hugo novel called Toilers of the Sea, which I've just finished. And again, we're hoping for some people to read that now. So, I mean, I'm pretty self-sufficient because yes, things are on hold. But I wasn't technically fully in production on any of those yet. It was kind of pre-production, so just got to be patient with that. And but it gives me time. There's a couple of TV series I'm developing with people, so it's actually a good time to concentrate on getting things done because in my IMDb or website, there's a lot of stuff that is in development that hasn't happened yet or needs taking forward. So I feel in a funny kind of way just as busy as ever.
Okay.
And and that's fun. It's fun to be able to concentrate, rather than kind of chasing my tail a bit.
Right on. And before I forget to ask, because one of your projects is right up my alley. It's not all Guns N' Roses for me. I'm a huge horror movie guy and a zombie guy. It says Project Z, zombie comedy thriller with a heavy metal soundtrack. So what's the status of that?
Well, again, that was written by a Welsh guy called Richard Williams, and it's a very funny script because it's kind of it basically is about a kind of American guy with British, Welsh heritage who comes back. He's inherited a farm, and then there's a kind of zombie apocalypse that happens around this small Welsh village, and part of when I got involved was, it was perfect for a real thrash metal type soundtrack. So again, that's another project that is on the cusp of being cast, and there are various producers who are raising the finance on it. So it's a fun project. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'm certainly looking out for that. Now, I'm curious for someone like you, because I'm sure you've been asked about how you got started in the business, but I guess I'm curious specifically, what was the movie, what was your favorite movie growing up? And I mean, I don't know if it was like a movie you just liked, or what was the movie that you said, what, I want to do that. I want to film like that. I want to be on the other side of the camera. Was there a movie or two when you were growing up that really took a hold of you?
Well, it was a weird thing. I come from a family who were in the business. My dad was a theatre film director, Christopher Morahan, and my grandfather was a production designer, and his brother, Tom Morahan and Dermot Morahan, and who did a lot of kind of movies and stuff. So I was kind of brought up in a culture of the arts and theatre and film and stuff like that. So it was kind of in the blood anyway. And my biggest influence, I think, really growing up, I was absolute nut for music. And, there was amazing kind of TV shows, in the UK in the late 60s, like Ready, Steady, Go, and the Top of the Pops in its infancy. And I was really influenced more by things like that, and the Beatles and everything, who made funny little films and all that kind of, for Sergeant Pepper and everything like that. So I was more influenced by, Small Faces, all that, that kind of late 60s. I mean, my brother had an older brother who was into all that stuff, so it was kind of hand-me-downs for me. And then my era of, kind of taking that forward was in the early 70s, which was Bowie and T-Rex and, but in those days, you had radical soul, whether it's Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder. But we used to listen to everything. I was really into kind of Southern rock as well, the Allman Brothers, Lynyrd Skynyrd, all that kind of stuff. So it was really music that kind of drove me in terms of, seeing, and I used to play in various bands, and then went to art college in 76 to St. Martin's, was there till 81. And, in those days, that was kind of, MTV in America was just starting to happen. And then early 80s, MTV Europe happened. And a bunch of us, Sophie Miller, myself, Vaughan Arnell, we're kind of the second, third generation music video directors. So suddenly, every music company, record company wanted videos for their artists, however cheap, they just wanted them. So we kind of came out of college and we were college, St. Martin's is around Soho, and we all got jobs as runners and, PAs and, and would, use short ends from other people's commercial shoots to make our own little videos and stuff like that. So it was kind of, for me, it was quite an organic kind of process. I was always a music nut.
Okay.
And so it wasn't specifically one film. I was influenced by films which, had music attached to it, whether it was, Easy Rider or, stuff like that, or Taxi Driver, and, I was kind of influenced more as a way of, rather than a movie, but the use of music and the music of that era, late 60s, early 70s, that really kind of drove me to kind of pursue music videos once they became a kind of viable kind of art form in the late 70s, early 80s.
And before we miss it, because you mentioned the Small Faces, you're also working on a biopic about that band, right?
I am, yeah. Again, another producer approached me, and that was my band when I was growing up. Because my brother by that time was into Cream and Hendrix and all that kind of stuff, and the Small Faces that can then kind of split into The Faces and Humble Pie was my whole kind of reason for being at a particular time. You know what I mean? It was just. There was something about Stevie Marriott's voice, and he was a he was almost like a feral kid from East London, white kid with a voice like a soul voice you just never, screaming soul rock voice you've never heard before in your life. It was insane, and loved it.
It must be, I don't know, like, how do you feel now? And you mentioned them, that they impacted you growing up, and now you're working on a film about them. It's almost like your career's come full circle. I mean, not to say it's completed, but do you feel that way, that maybe this is a project that's something that you've always wanted to do?
I hadn't really thought about it until, again, this producer, Bill Chamberlain, kind of called me about it. And I've kind of avoided biopics in the past. I mean, even now, there's rumblings about, people trying to develop a George Michael, thing, like a Freddie Mercury thing or Elton John thing, but it's not. I've always found those things like, yeah, they may be huge kind of money-making enterprises, but if you've worked with a particular artist or a particular person, you kind of thought of doing something that's kind of recreating them and the person you knew. I kind of resist that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I just find it a bit weird, a bit odd. But Small Faces I never worked with, I never knew them, so it's slightly different. To me, they're almost like cartoon characters in a funny kind of way. But what's interesting about them for me was, I was born and raised in London. They were from London, and they kind of, they happened in the shadow of the likes of the Stones and the Beatles. They were kind of very, very raw. I mean, they were, I was fascinated by them growing up. So when the producer approached me, and the more research I did, the more I thought, yeah, this could actually work really, really well. And there was also at the time a kind of a musical about Small Faces that was running in London in a smaller theatre. It wasn't like a big musical like Evita or anything like that. And I went to see it, and it was really bad. so I thought, I'd always liked films like Quadrophenia and stuff like that. So I kind of worked on a way that might, had an idea about how one might develop that as a proper movie. So I pitched it back to Bill, the producer, and he liked it. So we're just getting the script written at the moment.
Awesome. Were you just not, since you mentioned it, because George Michael is just one of the iconic artists that you've worked with. Were you approached about a movie for him, or is that just an idea that's floating around in the the scuttlebutt of the directors and writers? Is that something that people are actively working on?
They're not working. I know about it because they've approached the estate and stuff like that. And I'm quite close to the estate, so I get to hear these kind of things. But they're kind of. I don't think no one's actively working on it, because I think it's still very raw for the estate. I mean, he only passed 3 years ago.
I know it would be.
It'd be pretty raw for them if that happened, I think. So they're resisting it at the moment, and I'm not encouraging it either, to be fair.
Completely understandable. I agree with that. It is too soon, and it really, unless it's something that the estate and his family wanted, it's just like it just seems like it would just be for money, and that's I'm sure that's not coming from somebody who didn't know him. I would doubt that's something that he would want.
No, he would not want that.
Because we got a ton of fan questions for you, and
Oh, really?
people are. I mean. People are usually very excited because I get very cool guests on here, even if they're sometimes not marquee names that, I have a very intelligent audience and they come up with great questions, but it was just, overboard with you, which is great. The first one is because your first, I guess, feature that you worked on was Highlander 3. Is that correct?
It is correct, yeah.
I don't want to say it, but do you normally get that joke that, I thought there was only one? I know, it's terrible.
I do get that joke. I mean,
Sorry.
I got involved in the third one because Russell Mulcahy did the first and the second, but the second one was, everyone agreed it was a bit of a thumper. It wasn't that good or very well received. And my brief, for the third one from the producers was remake the first movie, which kind of I was kind of young and naive at the time.
How old were you at that time?
I don't know, mid-30s or something.
Okay.
I had a really tough experience on that. I was in Montreal, and I thought I was going to be able to post in London and all this kind of stuff, and there was various. I can't really say anything because I don't want to get in that kind of libel thing, but it was a very tough shoot, and some money fell out for various reasons, and I vowed after that. I mean, the film's okay. There's some good sequences in it, but it's not it's not really a patch on the first one. It's better than the second one. But I just I just didn't want to go near movies after that. It beat the crap out of me basically, and I didn't really want to go anywhere near film for years. So that's kind of when then after that I kind of moved from from music videos into commercials.
Okay.
And made a whole career out of that. So it was. I look back on it quite fondly now, but at the time it was tough. It was really tough.
Well, a learning experience, I'm sure. It sounds like a big learning experience for sure.
It was, yeah.
Oh, well, the specific question, this is from Jan Michael, so it ties in your filmmaking with your, directing music videos. I guess there is a rumor that you wanted GunsNRoses to be on the soundtrack, and Axl supposedly refused because of Mario Van Peebles. Is that true?
That is true.
Who's mad at Mario Van Peebles? How did that happen? Can you talk about?
I don't think he was mad at him.
Not a fan of his acting?
Yeah, I just don't think he was into it at all, and I think he was interested actually in doing something for my film, but because Queen had done the first one, he was such a huge Queen fan,
right?
But he just wasn't keen on Mario, and I think there were other reasons as well. I think the band were in a kind of, they'd come off that Use Your Illusion tour, and it was all, during that whole time they'd lost Izzy and all that kind of stuff, and I just think, even if he'd wanted to do it, I don't know if the dynamic within the band was conducive to doing it. There was a lot of people kind of, pulling in different directions.
All right. Well, I appreciate you answering that. Thanks, Jan Michael, for that question. This is from Carly. What was your first initial impression of GunsNRoses? How did that relationship start?
Well, they'd seen a video I'd done, Father Figure, for George Michael, which really was very narrative, and George doesn't even perform in it other than act in it. And they'd seen that, and it won, Best Director or whatever, MTV Awards. I was contacted by a friend of Axel called Josh Richmond, who was in his kind of inner circle at the time. And he had developed a kind of trilogy idea with a writer called Del James. Axel had. And they wanted to talk to me about that. And I went with Josh to meet Axel originally. And they had the idea. They kind of didn't really go through November Rain or Estranged, but they had the kind of initial idea for Don't Cry. And we kind of sat down and I kind of dissected what Del had written and thought what we could do or what we couldn't do and what elements of performance needed to be in there and what and then it would throw up things like always had to be a bit for Slash around the solos and all that kind of stuff. And so kind of Don't Cry was the template for the other big 3 videos going forward.
So Don't Cry was the first one that you did with them.
Yeah.
How was your experience, with meeting Shannon Hoon?
Well, I only really met him on the roof.
Okay.
When Axel announced to me that Shannon was going to, sing along with it. I think he'd sung on the record, but I hadn't met him or had a meeting with him, but he kind of turned up and, was part of that kind of crazy performance we did on the top of the building in LA with police helicopters flying about, deliberately flying about with, big spotlights coming in. We shut down that part of LA that evening.
Oh, wow.
Pretty much. It was, but it wasn't done like a Beatles or a U2 thing, which was supposed to generate a reaction from crowds or anything. It was just a kind of how spectacular could we get, really?
So that's the interesting thing about your specific Guns N' Roses resume, the kind of bare bones videos that you've done, Garden of Eden versus Estranged, where it's so grandiose. So this is from a friend of ours, also over the UK. This is from Andrew. He goes, Estranged is my favorite song, but Garden of Eden is my favorite video. It must have been nice to do something so simple but damn cool as opposed to a Hollywood production. Did you look at it that way? Like, how did you feel about the opposite ends of the spectrum, so to speak, as far as filmmaking?
Well, I engineered that video, Garden of Eden. I had done the 3 big videos and felt I was in the middle of some kind of Spinal Tap movie by that stage. Because one minute Stephanie was in and then she was out and then Axel wanted dolphins and, it was just... It was, people have asked me since then to, analyze, even people who've done kind of, college degrees about it and stuff like that.
Right.
There is no analysis. There is no hidden kind of symbolism and all that. It was just a bit anarchic, but kind of grandiose for, because they were kind of the biggest band in the world at the time. And so it kind of suited them in a weird kind of way, but we were shooting another video, The Garden, which is a kind of simple black and white performance thing.
Yeah.
And I went to Slash had been talking to me about they were going to do the Spaghetti Incident, this album, right? Mm-hmm. And we're just going to go in and lay it down really quickly. And I said, well, there's a couple of tracks like that on Use Your Illusion. I said, Garden of Eden. I said, that to me that sounds like a punk record,
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, yeah, you're right. And then he said, to be honest, we might be playing stadiums and doing these huge videos. He said, but really, we're the most comfortable when we're just thrashing it out like Garden of Eden. And I went, man, you got to make a fucking video for that. He goes, well, I don't know, And Axel had come that day and he was late and he was a bit cranky and all that. And he said, well, you can ask Axel. Because I said, I've got an idea. I've got an idea to do a one-shot video with a fisheye lens and we just should do it. We're here. We should fucking do it. And he said, well, it's not even going to be a single Slash. I said, it doesn't matter. I think we should just capture that. You've talked to me about how enthusiastic you are about, in reality, you're a punk band, not, whatever. He said, we can ask Axel. He said, but I bet he'll say no. He doesn't want to do it. So I go to Axel, and me and the DP, Daniel Pearl, who's my go-to DOP at the time, brilliant DOP. And we said to Axel, and Daniel was totally on board with this, because I'd mentioned to him a couple of hours earlier, and he'd had a fisheye lens sent down from the camera house. And we had these kind of special, I've forgotten what they were called, something Lux lights, which you basically would flash in time with the gate when the film's going through the gate. But if you offset them so they're not in time, you get this weird kind of pixelated kind of look to it. So we had those lights anyway, and Daniel went, "Oh, why don't we try and dial that in? Because it's only a one-shot video, but you could give it a really interesting look." So we approached Axel, and he was going, "Well, I don't know." He was tired. He was a bit cranky. He was, whatever he was, mood that day. And I said to him, "Look, just give me one take, okay? Just give me one take. And if you don't like, we can watch it back on the monitor. If you don't like it, fine, we'll just leave it at that." So I managed to persuade him to do it. Wow. And we did one take, and he had a look at it. He went, "This is fucking amazing." And then we did like 5 or 6 takes, and then we did, a few versions in post with a bouncing ball over the lyrics and all that kind of stuff. And we just had fun and in a funny kind of way, I think not only for me, but for the band as well, it was a kind of relief to do something that was kind of back to their roots. That wasn't had all the pressure of all the big money on the videos and, half the band not turning up on time, I just think it was just one of those great moments where, I'm glad I pushed the envelope, and in a funny kind of way, it's I would say it's my favourite video with them. I mean, I know it's a weird thing to say with November Rain, has won all these things, and it's an iconic video, and yeah, it's an amazing video, but in a weird kind of, in a personal way, I love Garden of Eden.
I think that's amazing, because you're not alone. I know before I did this Guns N' Roses podcast, when I was just a normal boy, a normal Guns N' Roses fan, November Rain blew me away, and that's what really got me into, the band and rock music, really, because I thought this is what I want a rock band to be. But I remember also the first time I saw Garden of Eden, I'm like, that's also what I want a rock band to be. So that's what it just made the both sections for me, G and R, why I love them so much. But the fact that it took some convincing, and it's just you did push it, and I think history shines it shines well on that video, and it's still a high regard. I think it shows a great side to the band. Axl's faces. Did he just do that on his own? Licking the microphone, doing silly faces. What about like Teddy Zigzag dancing in the background? Is that all you, or how did that come about?
It just kind of happened. I mean, I said, well, we're in the fisheye lens, let's stick the mic there. And because it's a manic track, he kind of performed it like that. And because of these kind of Lux lights, which was giving it a slightly pixelated view, it makes it feel really manic. The other people wandering out of, there's a great moment in one of them where, the roadie pushes one of the guys, I've forgotten who it is, back into frame and stuff like that. And I just never cut. The worst thing you can do when you're doing a take of something like that, which is a one-stop take, is to stop it. Because their kind of energy was so, adrenaline was so high to go cut, and that's, he wandered out of frame. They were going, fuck that, you know what I mean? So it was, excuse my swearing.
No, it's okay.
But also once they all saw what it was, they all got it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They all got it. They knew how to kind of, and that's why, Slash then comes up to the camera to do his little solo, and Axl backs off and starts dancing. I mean, they just got it. It was just, Daniel Pearl said it was probably the greatest moment he'd ever filmed in rock and roll.
Wow.
which I thought was pretty,
well,
good praise, really.
It is, and especially compared with the other scenes you're involved in. So I got to get to the more grandiose scenes, and these are, I want to give these, while they're my questions as well, I want to give credit to the listeners and show, how much your work is appreciated by everyone. This is from James Lansbury, who came up with the desert guitar solo scene in November Rain, and how many takes was that one?
Well, that is an interesting one as well, because we've done November Rain and everyone liked, we've done Don't Cry and everyone had liked Slash driving the car off the cliff and then kind of, you think he's gone with the car and the girl, and camera comes up through the broken barrier and finds him doing the solo. I mean, it kind of was, absolutely bonkers and ridiculous, but everyone loved it. So it became this kind of like, how can we outdo that, the guitar solo, in the next video. So, because it had already become this thing where Slash had his moment and stuff like that. And so I had this idea. It was kind of, this was never in the original storyboard, but, they're in the church and I think originally when Slash starts to walk out, if I remember, that big church, after he's given Axl the ring, I think first time that happened was Slash was like, I got to get out, because we've been in this church for hours, and I need a cigarette or something. And literally, when I was about to call cut, he just turned and walked out. Not because he was pissed off or anything. He just was like, I don't know. It just kind of happened. He walked out, and we were still discussing, even when at that stage, even though we were in production and we were shooting, how to then bring in the solo. And so that night, it gave me an idea. And I went to Slash and I said, look, I've got this take of you, turning and walking out. Why don't we then use that to transition into you walking out of a completely different church in the middle of nowhere? And he went, oh, it sounds like a good idea. Well, it was one of those things that, you talk up an idea and it nearly doesn't happen, because I then spent the next week or so traveling around southern states, looking for a white church in the middle of nowhere, from New Mexico to, everywhere. Arizona or all this kind of places. Something that wasn't too far from LA, but was far enough to maybe find a white Baptist church.
How do you go about that? Because, today you just use Google Earth. How do you go about finding this random church in the middle of nowhere?
Well, you call people in various places like Austin or Santa Fe, or you know what I mean. But places that have a kind of, have a film kind of culture or infrastructure, and there'll be location people that go, oh yeah, you should have a look at that. And that's what happened out of New Mexico. There's a guy who said, oh yeah, there's a ranch down here where they shot Young Guns. It's like a Western ranch, and there's a church in there, and I think it's on a pallet, and you can drag it out into the middle of the desert, basically. And that's what we did. I mean, there's nothing inside that church. We basically dragged it out on a pallet in the middle of nowhere, put a white fence around it, and basically used it to to do that transition where he walks out and plays in this most epic fucking guitar solo you've ever seen in your life. Now, there's it's an interesting thing because I think we only did about 9 takes, but I had 4 or 5 cameras, and then we had a helicopter that came in and did a couple of takes as well. So I mean, literally, we threw everything at it. Steady cam, handheld. I mean, you name it, we did it. And there's a very interesting story about that bit of the shoot, because when we were in the hotel in Santa Fe, there was another photographer who became a director, Anton Corbijn, who made the movie Control. And he was a photographer then, but he'd kind of done some music videos with people like Depeche Mode and stuff like that. And I knew him because we'd been at the same company, Vivid, in London years before. And so I ran into him in the hotel, and he goes, "Oh, Andy, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm shooting, GunsNRoses video." And he goes, "Oh, I'm not." He was out there doing a photography assignment for Stern or some German magazine or whatever. And he said, "Can I come out and see you shoot?" I said, "Yeah." So he came out, and he saw this kind of helicopter and Slash, doing this thing, and he turned to me and he goes, "God, Andy," he said, "that's incredible." He said, "Is this the whole video?" I went, "No, it's about 30 seconds." Which rather put it into perspective, really. But we made it. I mean, that has become the iconic, guitar solo from a music video. I think one of the best.
Did you know at that time when you were filming it? I mean, you obviously knew you were going into this video with the biggest band in the world at the time, and it's a long song. It's over the top, so you knew it was something special. But did you know it would have the life and become the iconic, not just for it being expensive, but just for those scenes all these years later? Did you get any sense while you were filming?
Yeah, I mean, you knew this, when Slash walks out and plays there and you start to see the stuff on the monitors as you're filming it, you go, "Fuck, I've never seen anything like this. This is amazing." And, our excitement grew as the video grew. I mean, yes, it's bonkers and it's all over, there's things that inexplicable, but that's kind of where, in a funny kind of way, that's where the band's heads were at the time. You know what I'm saying? It was, Axl was kind of off on this thing and, had these big ideas and I think at first and some of the band didn't even want to do videos as big as that. But I mean, the proof was in the pudding. As soon as they started making, Use Your Illusion had done, I think, 12, 14 million by when they started doing the big videos, and the albums went to over 25 million after that. You know what I'm saying? So he had a really good sense of kind of where the band were at, and I also think they'd kind of lost Izzy at that point, and it was part of him wanting to make a huge statement, and they're big opuses and they're long songs and they're not Paradise City or whatever, but it was that phase at their time really kind of reflected where they were at, I think. And I think, for a lot of people, I even had people like, Sofia Coppola's assistant calling up saying, could she, buy the storyboards from us and all that, which I've kept them and stuff. But I think, for a certain, certain genre at the time, and the way that MTV was at the time, where videos were really important. They weren't wallpaper. They had huge, kind of global kind of releases and premieres and stuff like that. I think it became a kind of seminal moment for a lot of fans and a lot of people. So yeah, I didn't kind of anticipate that, but it is the video that keeps on giving.
When, I mean, again, I think it surpassed 1 billion views, right? In the last year. I mean, that's wow. Yeah. Just wow. You just mentioned Sofia Coppola. Did she approach you to make a movie about it for the storyboard? What's No,
she just wanted to. She just loved the video apparently.
Oh, so she just wanted it as a collectible?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got to keep that stuff.
No, I got it.
do you have it on display, or do you have like a
No, I got 3 folders of it, and one has my notes in it, and I just kind of keep it really for the minute. And I'm not really into kind of in this modern age of kind of exploitation. And I mean, at some point, I think I might frame the stuff where I've got my notes written on it and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I can't even imagine what you have. This is also another question, obviously plenty of questions. This is from Iman, and this is about another grandiose scene in the Estranged video. How did the idea come up about jumping off an aircraft carrier? How was that pitched, and who pitched that?
It wasn't. It was an oil tanker.
Oh, okay, oil tanker, right.
This was a kind of, I think it was an idea that Axl had, really, that he'd got his, he'd split up with Stephanie at this point. She was not gonna, he said, I don't want another girl in the video. I'd rather have dolphins. And so we kind of jumped on that and said, okay, let's have dolphins. And then it kind of, the madness came from there. And he said, yeah, we could do a transition. I could jump off this boat and and then I'm underwater and then I'm surrounded by dolphins. And I mean, it was just bonkers, really. And but we, wanted to realise, part of his vision. You know what I'm saying? So, we found out there was this tanker in Galveston, and that it was lying offshore waiting to come in, and we could use it for a couple of hours. And we had a stunt guy dressed as Axel, who, he's on the boat, but the guy who actually jumps is not him.
Okay.
And, but then once he goes down, and then you feel Stephanie holding onto his legs, and so by that time she was now going to be in the video. And that lasted one day, and then they were talking to each other. I mean, it was just, we were kind of making it up as we went along. I got to be honest with you, to be perfectly truthful. But,
it doesn't seem that way.
No, I mean, it was, I don't know, he was going through a lot. So, 1 minute was, and then we tried to, the second solo for Slash, we ended up, building this rig where he comes out of the choppy water. That was shot on a back lot at Universal in their big tank and stuff like that. And I mean, that was a pretty, outrageous, and that was, probably the most difficult Slash solo to film. I mean, him floating down Sunset was okay. It feels a bit static now, and the special effects of the dolphins in the road doesn't really, it's not that great to me now. But I think that was kind of the level of the effects at the time. But I do like the second solo when he merges out of the raging sea, and he did that for real. We built an underwater rig, hydraulic rig that lifted him up. We nailed his boots to the rig. So he kind of comes, and he didn't mind going in and out of the water. He was amazing, absolutely amazing. I mean, to be honest, all of them are pretty amazing on all the videos. They really mucked in and have a kind of mad or outrageous ideas. They were all pretty good about doing stuff or respecting each other's things. They were incredible, really.
Good. No, that's always good to hear. This is from, and I certainly am not going to keep you for forever, because I apologize for all the questions that I can't get to. This is from Nick Duguay. He wants to know another iconic scene. Whose idea, or did this just happen, about jumping into the cake for the whole, the pinnacle of the November Rain scene, like that whole chaotic, jumping into the cake? How did that happen?
Well, I think it was a bit of a bet with Ricky Rackman, who's actually the one that goes through the cake, who did that, that late night rock and roll show. I don't know if it was MTV or was it on a...
Yeah, it was Headbangers Ball on MTV.
Headbangers Ball, and he'd come, he's sitting there in the... he was a mate of Axel's, and I was saying to Axel, we need to have someone to trash the table. It wasn't really the cake things that, and Ricky was like, I'll go through the cake, and Axel went, yeah, I want to see that. and literally, we only, had one chance at it, and he did it. Basically, it was a bit of fun that, everyone, oh my God, are we actually going to use this? But everyone thought it was pretty funny, so we did.
I'm sure you get asked all the time, what happened to Stephanie? Like, how did she die? Or is that left up on for interpretation?
That's deliberately ambiguous.
Okay.
That is ambiguous.
How did you come up with, I guess, the coffin where half her face is covered? Was that just to make it look cool, or was that part of the story? Because, I mean... That's
part of the ambiguity, basically.
Okay.
So, the impression that maybe someone shot half her face off.
Right.
But it was kind of part of the fun. You see them in Don't Cry wrestling with a gun and stuff like that. I mean, to be fair, the Del James short story, trilogy or whatever was pretty specific, but it kind of got stretched out into different things depending on kind of where Axel's head was at the time and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And
sure.
He went through some pretty messy stuff with Stephanie, especially while we were doing Estranged. So it all became a little bit like, it was never quite resolved and stuff like that. But I think kind of in the end he didn't mind that. He was smart enough to know that it in the years to come, it would throw up more questions than answers, and he quite liked that.
Yeah, I think we GNR fans, because they're a band that doesn't give you much, but we eat it up regardless.
No, absolutely, yeah.
You've touched on it a few times, and if you don't want to go into it, if it's not your place to say, but this is a question from Ken Begora, because you mentioned Axl's mood at the time, and I'm not the kind of broadcaster that I'm looking for dirt. I'm just, maybe a generic feeling. Was it a united band atmosphere at the time? Did you notice a difference in the band from video to video? Whether that depended on Axl's relationship with Stephanie, or was it, hey, these are my boys from GunsNRoses, and here we are on another project? Was there any sort of difference, or just, in a way, business as usual, if you can do that with a band like GNR?
Yeah, pretty much they were together on it. Axl had his own personal issues, which I don't really feel qualified to talk about.
I understand.
Than, he was going through stuff with Stephanie, which was pretty much, out in the open about, whatever. But in terms of the band, they were pretty together. I mean, they'd kind of segmented, the bands and their girlfriends, and some had slightly different managers, and but it was pretty together. I mean, I never saw any kind of angst between them. Yeah, you might be waiting for one member, you might be waiting for another member, or somebody didn't show up, but that was kind of nature of the beast. But I have to say I was lucky, in the sense that at the time it was kind of pre-fragmentation, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
That all kind of happened after Spaghetti incident, and I was off doing Highlander 3 by then, so I never really saw that kind of, disintegration of the band or the angst between them or that. So I was pretty lucky in that respect. And everyone kind of mucked in, it was still, Izzy had left, and I didn't know Izzy particularly or anything, but it just, there was still, and I think Axl was hurting about that as well at the time. That was his kind of, the three, him, Axl, and Slash were the kind of engine room of the band really at the time. And I think, and that's not to say anything, against Duffer or anything like that, but I think it hurt Axl more than the others. But they would, I was lucky. They were pretty together, and into the ideas, and kind of, and kind of getting the most out of it. So yeah, I only really had positive kind of.
That's great. I mean,
engineer, kind of. There was nothing engineered or contrived. It was. They were very positive.
That's great to hear. Here's a really, and this is a different video, really nerd question, which I appreciate. This is from Mr. Anderson from San Antonio. He loves all your videos, especially yesterday's. Whose idea was the classic style microphone that was used?
Sorry, no. Yesterday's was the one that. Sorry, it wasn't when we shot Garden of Eden that we were shooting yesterday's. I've just remembered. Sorry, it wasn't the Garden. It was cool. It was yesterday. I think Axl had requested it. He wanted to have an old style kind of microphone. I don't think it was a contrivance that I'd forced on him or anything, but it kind of helped us out when we did the Garden of Eden because it looked great too.
And I just remember it's so funny how that was filmed close with the with some other videos, but the look was different. Axl with the ponytail and Slash with the different hat, but it just worked. Even the most simplistic videos, those subtle changes, fans obviously pick up on.
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, even though it was the same day we shot Garden of Eden, it was a kind of more relaxed kind of warehouse video, if you know what I mean. It was not. It was supposed to be opposite of Big Bang kind of stage, kind of, all the bells and whistles and stuff like that. It was supposed to be a bit more kind of organic and edgy and just kind of a bit rough, if you know what I mean. So it just felt kind of more naturalistic in that respect.
All right. Let me get one more question in here for you. This is from Josephine III. Were you ever contacted later about making any videos for Chinese Democracy?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't. But, that's fine. I mean, I don't know if they even made any videos around Chinese.
No, I mean there's one that's has leaked around the internet that might be the better video, but who knows if it's a fan made or if it's an official one. But officially, there are no videos for Chinese Democracy.
No, I wasn't. I mean, it's one of those things. People think, because I did so much work with them that we're on the phone to each other every other week. But it's a phase of your life. You go through it, and they move on, and you move on, and it's not something that I particularly fret about or anything. And I'm proud of the body of work we did together, and I'm sure they are. And it's I'd rather have if they want to revisit that, that's up to them. But I've always felt it's like when I did with George Michael. I did a lot of stuff with him. I didn't do everything with him. And that's always the artist's prerogative. And I think any music video director would endorse that. You know what I'm saying? So
sure. And I just want to read this one last comment because I want to get because I appreciate everyone who submitted questions. This is more of a comment I want you to hear. This is from Troy. He doesn't have any specific questions, but asked questions about Garden of Eden and Yesterday's, which we have. The others are epic and, of course, get all the attention praised over the years, but Garden of Eden and Yesterday's are two of the best videos they've ever done and two of my all-time favorites. So simple, but very effective. So it just shows the, not just the vision of Axl, but what you are able to accomplish. Specifically, just from the bare bones to the over the top, that you're able to do it all. That doesn't seem to be a challenge for you that you can't face, including Highlander 3. You get through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's great for someone to say that. I mean, I am proud of that I, in the end managed to get them to do some things that maybe they hadn't thought of doing before. So it was to me blindingly obvious that they were essentially a band, not a band playing stadiums. They were actually, there was some punk ethic in there. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Not just a heavy metal band, and I always like that about them. So I'm glad that I could they respected me enough, and I respected them for letting me do it.
I can't even imagine where do they rank? Because again, you've worked with so many iconic people, whether it's Luther Vandross or George Michael or Ozzy. You've done so many. It's iconic videos and songs and artists. Are you able to, without any sort of slight to any others, is there one artist or band or group in particular that that you look back now and you're like, wow, I can't believe this happened in my life? Is there one that stands out above the others?
Well, Guns are definitely up there with George Michael. There was a particular video I did for Tina Turner called Steamy Windows. That was just like, I could barely speak when I was doing that one. Yeah, but George and Guns were definitely probably the two most iconic artists and favourite videos I did for people.
Awesome.
In the end, I couldn't really single them out. I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing people, and then they say it's not to the detriment of others, but
exactly.
Those two were amazing.
Awesome. Well, Andy Morahan, I can't thank you enough for the time that you've given me today and answering my questions and the listener questions. Obviously, your work is up there with anybody else's.
Thank you.
Your resume is as impressive as anyone's, and the fact that you're continuing. Again, I'm looking on your website, and you're at least 8 projects you're currently working on at the time. What is the best way for people? Is it your website, andymorahan.com, for people to keep up to date with everything going on?
Yeah, I update it pretty regularly.
All right, awesome. Well, Andy, again, thank you for your time. Very much appreciated. And I hope we get to do this again. And
Brandon, I really enjoyed that. That was great. Good questions, and thanks very much for taking the time.
How cool was that? For real. I mean, these are videos just like I'm sure every single one of you listening grew up watching and has the same passion for, whether it is the over-the-top November Rain or Estranged or the bare-bones silliness of Garden of Eden. And can you believe that the video almost did not happen? So thank you, Andy Morahan, for making Garden of Eden happen and just the creativity of these iconic scenes that kind of were like happy accidents. You know, the dare between Ricky Rackman and Axel about jumping in the cake, but that's something that we all remember still all these years later. So I asked as many questions as I could. Obviously, I could have kept him here forever, and we felt like we only would have scratched the surface, because it's not just Guns N' Roses this guy has worked with. It's, it's Aerosmith, it's Michael Jackson. I wish I asked him about Michael Jackson now that I'm saying it out loud. Bon Jovi, Ozzy, Paul McCartney. I mean, the guy's resume is insane. I got to be honest with you, I was so surprised how quickly he responded to my request to be interviewed, and just how nice he was. Because you just never know with somebody with this kind of a resume. You don't know if they have, not like I heard anything or expected him to have like an ego, but just how down to earth and how approachable he is, as approachable as you can be via Skype in the UK when I'm in Queens, but you know what I mean. So, and before I go, I have to thank somebody for helping me set up this interview. Maybe not directly. I shouldn't say directly, but you guys are fantastic with guest suggestions. So this was through mygnrforum.com, and if you are on the forum, you can always message me there as well. My username on there is Gambit83. I was a big X-Men Gambit fan growing up. I know his powers aren't very cool, but he looked cool and he got girls. I think that's why I liked him so much. Anyway, but I digress. So this is from let me see, GNR Persia on my GNR forum, and her name is Adele, or Adel, forgive me, because it's spelled like Adele, but without the E at the end. But anyway, GNR Persia on mygnrforum.com sent me a message, I don't know, not that long ago, to suggest Andy Morahan, and I'm like, yeah, that's a name I haven't reached out to yet, for whatever reason. Maybe because I didn't think I would get him. Sometimes that happens. And your suggestion made me do it, and look what we got. We got nearly an hour with the guy. So thank you, GNR Persia, rather than just potentially screwing up your name again. So that does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. What will you see on the next one? I have no idea. I am blown away. I am blown away by the episodes that you help me continue to put out. So thank you to all of you, whether you listen on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, you found us on alternativenation.net. Oh, and I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast either. You can now find the podcast on the website for Q1043.com. Q1043 is the classic rock station here in New York City. Might be the biggest classic rock station in the United States. I've mentioned working on that show before on podcasts, and I think I played you a fun phoner game that we did a few months ago to give away tickets before this whole Armageddon thing happened with the legendary Jim Kerr, Hall of Famer. So the fact that I'm kind of in that world, in a way, I'm on the same website as Jim Kerr, and you can hear Eddie Trunk's radio show also on Q1043, so it's a big deal. Something that I've always wanted to achieve, to be a part of that station and to have, I didn't ask for it either. I didn't go to my program director there and say, hey, I have this podcast. Can you put it on the website? No, if it sucked, if he didn't like it, he wouldn't have done it. But it was his idea. And I was like, really? Okay. So yeah, you can now find us on Q1043.com if you want, but SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So again, thanks for hanging out for another episode. In the meantime, please tell a friend about us. Facebook.com/The AFD Show, Twitter @The AFD Show, Instagram, we're on there, and anywhere, as I mentioned, you get your podcasts. And you can leave reviews, comments, tell people, and welcome them to the podcast. All right, so until the next one, when will you see it? Well, in the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
To the lame ass security, I'm going home.